Hello. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Everyone can hear me okay? And everyone, I'm hoping, can hear me virtually as well. So we're having a hybrid meeting tonight. It's a bit of an experiment for the City Planning Division. Thank you, everybody, for coming to tonight's meeting on the Malvern Town Centre proposal. Appreciate your time. So we're going to officially start. So if everybody doesn't mind taking a seat, that would be appreciated. So because we're meeting both virtually and in person, I'm just going to run through a few housekeeping items before we get started this evening in order to ensure that we have a productive meeting. So if you are listening to this meeting online, virtually on your computer or on your phone, if you're having issues connecting, please dial 416-915-6530. And when prompted for an access code, enter 263-1762-2896. And then when prompted for an access code, enter 667-22023. So to ensure a productive and collaborative meeting, I just wanted to take a moment to highlight the City of Toronto's Code of Conduct. So when you have the opportunity to speak, we'd appreciate if you use one voice at a time and be direct and frame questions to specific speakers. Be brief and limit yourself to one question or comment at a time. There will be many opportunities to engage. Let's be good listeners and keep an open mind. For people in the room, you can raise your hand if you would like to ask a question. There will be a question portion of the evening later on. We actually have a microphone just over there as well for people if they're comfortable using it. Be respectful. The City of Toronto is an inclusive public organization. Racist or other forms of discriminatory, prejudicial, or hateful comments and questions will not be tolerated. And then if you have other questions, you can visit the City of Toronto's public consultation webpage. So please be aware that this meeting is being recorded. So personal information such as your opinions, statements, and voice will become part of a public record. Under Section 27 of the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, records created for the general public do not restrict access and may be made available on the City Planning website. So your registration information will not be disclosed as part of the public record. So for example, if you signed in this evening. So now that that's out of the way, before we formally kick off in tonight's event, I would just like to take this opportunity to acknowledge and honor the land, territory, and First Peoples that have lived in Toronto for thousands of years, and the enduring presence of Indigenous persons in this area. So a land acknowledgement is very important. It involves making a statement recognizing the traditional territory of Indigenous persons who called the land home before the arrival of settlers. So the land I'm standing on today is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. I also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. I would also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge all treaty peoples, including those who came here as settlers, as migrants, either in this generation or generations past, and those of us who came here involuntarily, particularly those who were brought to these lands as a result of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery. We pay tribute to those ancestors of African origin and descent. Okay, so moving into tonight's agenda, I apologize, I didn't introduce myself, but my name is Samuel. I'm a city planner with the City of Toronto. So I'm City of Toronto staff, and I am the project lead or person that's assigned to the Malvern Town Centre redevelopment. So just quickly go through tonight's agenda. So we'll quickly have a quick round of introductions to let you know who's participating this evening, including some opening remarks from elected officials who we are fortunate enough to have here in attendance with us tonight. Afterward, City Planning, so myself, will provide a very short presentation about the planning process, followed by a presentation from the applicant for the Malvern Town Centre redevelopment proposal, who are just seated over here to the right of me, who will speak to their proposal for the Malvern Town Centre. And then afterwards, we've reserved almost an hour or more for questions and answers. So there's an opportunity to ask questions in this public forum. However, if you're not comfortable, we can talk afterward if you don't want to ask questions in front of a room of people. So, and we hope to have everything wrapped up around 8 p.m. So in terms of introductions, I've already let you know who I am. My name is Samuel. I work in Scarborough Community Planning. We have a number of city staff here who are seated to the left of me. Some staff from transportation, urban design, as well as parks and engineering as well. And as well, we have the applicant team who can introduce themselves when they get into their presentation. We're just going to kick things off with some remarks from the elected officials, and then I'm going to jump into my presentation. So I would just like to invite Councillor Myers to the floor to kick things off for us, followed by the Deputy Mayor Jennifer McKelvey, and then we'll go into the presentation portion of the evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samuel. My name is Jamal Myers, and I'm the City Councillor for Ward 23, Scarborough North. Thank you to Deputy Mayor Jennifer McKelvey for coming. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you to the developer, Davpart, and for city planners, Samuel, and the rest of the city staff for helping out to put today together. Exciting that we are actually having the city's first ever hybrid meeting. So we do have some people that are online as well participating. Throughout, this is the second meeting that my office has participated in. We actually hosted a meeting prior to this about a month ago that was also very well attended. So we know there's a lot of good interest in what's happening with this project. We know people are invested in seeing whatever happens for the long-term benefit of the community. We're all here working together to make sure that happens and making sure that we have a collaborative, open, transparent process that welcomes new residents, but also creates real and tangible benefits for the residents that are currently living here. So I look forward to working with you all. My office is always open. Please feel free to reach out, and I will pass it now to Deputy Mayor McKelvey. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor Myers, and thank you everybody for being here today. And I'd like to thank City of Toronto planning staff for organizing this meeting and in this format that has both a virtual and in-person component. We all know that Malvern Town Centre is an important space for the residents of Malvern and Scarborough Rouge Park, which is just across the street from it, and in Scarborough North, where Councillor Myers is the councillor. And it's an important place for people to meet. And we know it supports jobs. It has access to culturally specific foods and groceries and houses important community services. And I think that we're all committed to ensuring that whatever goes forward continues to meet those important needs that many residents have written to us about with respect to ensuring that, we support grocery stores in the neighborhood, our wonderful social community agencies, and eventually transit, and importantly, housing for both this generation and the next generation. So I'm really interested in hearing what the applicants have to say about housing. We all know it's important, and it's the number one thing that people write into our office about. And so thank you so very much to City of Toronto planning staff for facilitating this important public consultation. And thank you to the applicants for coming out tonight as well to share their vision for this area with us, and being willing to listen to our feedback here today. This isn't the only opportunity for public input. You'll hear tonight that there'll be other opportunities for residents to engage in the process, including the formation of a local advisory group, which city staff will talk about more. So I know we have a full agenda, so I'll wrap it up there. But I do, again, I can't thank them enough, our amazing City of Toronto staff, who are doing a lot of work to try to advance our housing action plan in the City of Toronto, which has a target of 285,000 new homes by 2031, 65,000 of which are affordable, 18,000 of which are supportive. So they're working on the ground day in and probably night in too, to make that happen. So thank you all for being here for this important conversation.
Okay, Thank you so much to Councillor Myers and the Deputy Mayor for providing us with some opening remarks. So tonight we are meeting as a community because changes are proposed on the Malvern Town Centre property. This is your neighborhood and I'm sure you have many questions. So we're going to eventually get to those. First, I'll quickly just speak a little bit about the planning process, how the City of Toronto evaluates a development application like this. And then afterward, you'll hear from the applicant team who will walk us through their vision for the Malvern Town Centre lands. And then afterward, we're going to get to some question and answers. So, this is a City of Toronto hosted meeting. So most importantly, we're here tonight to listen to your comments and your feedback and to answer your questions. So this is your meeting. So I'll quickly just touch, what is proposed on the Malvern Town Centre lands. What are we here to talk about tonight? So in June 2022, the landowner submitted 2 applications to the City of Toronto, so about 15 months ago. So the landowner is seeking permission from the city to amend the City of Toronto's official plan in order to redevelop and to transform the Malvern Town Centre into a mixed-use community. So to achieve that vision, they're seeking to create what's called a site and area specific policy, which is just a fancy way of saying they're trying to create a master plan to build a mixed-use community on the lands of the Malvern Town Centre. They're proposing to do it through 10 phases, and those policies that I was describing that they're seeking to draft for this City of Toronto's official plan would guide the way that the mall would change over time, should this application be approved. And then the second application is the one that's of the most immediate consequence. It's a zoning bylaw amendment for a 32 and 39 story tower at the intersection of Nielsen and Tapscott Road. So that's the one of the most immediate consequence, and that's a zoning bylaw amendment. So as I had mentioned, it's a pretty big vision. It's a big master plan. What they're seeking to achieve is 15 towers, approximately 5,700 residential units, 4-acre park, and about 5 new public streets. So it's, as I mentioned, it's constructed to be through 10 phases, multi-year approach, and they would be implementing their vision through a series of zoning bylaw amendments in the future. And they'll speak to their vision for the site later in detail. And as I had mentioned, that's the most one of immediate consequence is the 32 and 39 story building on the surface parking lot. And for those who are watching virtually and for those who can see the screen in attendance tonight, it's where the red star is. That's the corner where they're seeking to get approval to build a 32 and 39 story building in the immediate future. And of course, this is all very early in the process, so we're here to hear from you this evening. And as well, naturally, we have a lot of questions about the phasing plan and how this would relate to, the operations of the existing mall on site today. So how does the City of Toronto evaluate development applications? So let's say that, somebody wants to go from this to this. How do we evaluate whether or not that sort of change is in the public interest? So in determining the public interest, city planning works to balance both public, private, and community interests as part of our work. We look to a number of factors which help us make a recommendation to City Council on whether we can support an application like this. These factors essentially can be categorized into 4 different baskets. The first thing we look at are the facts of the development proposal. So we look at the details of the height, the density, the number of parking spaces, and the physical context of the area. So basically the surroundings of the site. Secondly, we look at planning policies. So the province has policies that we have to adhere to. And there's the City of Toronto's official plan, which is basically guiding development and change in the city. It basically tells us how to manage change. And then we have laws that we adhere to, like zoning bylaws and other land use planning laws that we are required to follow. And then the fourth basket, most importantly, is people. So we rely on the input of people, residents, stakeholders, elected officials, City of Toronto's technical experts as well, to provide us with input on the application. And just for those who can see the screen, and virtually that's just a graphic showing those four things that we look at, the four baskets for determining whether or not redeveloping property in a way that is proposed tonight is in the public interest. So we'll just look at the first basket, which is the site context, physical context. So that's this basket. So here's the existing site today. It's quite big. It's 11.1 hectares in size, which is about approximately like 15 soccer fields in size. So it's pretty big. And right now the existing mall is about 27,000 square meters of commercial gross floor area. The mall itself is occupying about less than half of the lands right now. Zooming out a bit, you can see the McLevin Woods Park to the north. On the northeast corner, there's a self-storage facility that's proposed, which is unrelated to this application. It's a separate landowner. And then to the west, there's a townhouse development, which is currently under construction for 298 residential dwelling units. So that's a little bit of context. And then I'm going to zoom out a little bit further so you can get a bird's eye view of the site. So the reason that I'm doing this is it's important to highlight the physical context of the area as it helps us inform the height and density that would be appropriate based on some of the existing context of the area. So as you know, there are a number of tall and mid-rise buildings in the area, some apartment buildings. The most notable ones are to the northeast, which is the Mayfair on the Green condo. Those are about 20 stories in height. And then there are a few other apartment buildings to the south and to the east. Then there are some commercial plazas to the north and to the east of it. There's a 3-story commercial building across Nielsen, and then there's the No Frills and grocery store across McLevin. To the immediate south, across Tapscott Road, there are some low-rise residential areas and notably some cooperative housing on the south side of the street. And then to the north, we have some more low-rise residential houses north of McLevin Avenue. So lastly, just in terms of like talking about the context, looking to the planned context of the future, it is anticipated that the Eglinton East LRT will be arriving in Malvern along Nielsen Road in the future. It's still really in the planning stages, so it's not completely fleshed out yet. But it's really important to note because if you're planning for an area where you're going to bring 10,000 new residents, a really big population growth, we want to be able to ensure that those people move around, are able to move around and get to and from where they want to go. So that's a really important part of the planned context is this potential future rapid transit, which is possibly going to arrive in the future in Malvern. So that's the existing and planned context. I'll just move next to policies and laws. So just covering 2 of those 4 baskets that I had mentioned earlier. So this is what we call a planning framework. So the reason it's important is because all planning decisions in Ontario are based on a provincially led planning system. So the province of Ontario essentially tells us we have certain provincial interests based on housing, transit, the environment, and you have to ensure that any of your policies reflect those provincial interests. So it's really a top-down approach. The City of Toronto is a creature of the province, essentially. So we have those provincial laws and policies that we are required to implement. And the way that we do that are through legislated tools, which are the City of Toronto's official plan, as well as zoning bylaws. So that's essentially how we implement the province's rules. And in the case of this application that we're talking about tonight, the proponent is seeking to amend the City of Toronto's official plan, which is where that red star is on the screen, as well as the zoning bylaw. So that's where the 2 applications exist in this hierarchy. So looking at what that means for the Malvern Town Centre, on the left, we have the provincial policies that I had mentioned, and they provide us guidance on housing, the environment, heritage, transit, and employment. And we implement these provincial goals to the official plan. So Again, as I had mentioned, it's the most important document for guiding growth and change in Toronto. It basically specifies how we're supposed to manage change and how the city should grow and evolve. It really speaks to a lot of quality of life factors that affect people's quality of life in Toronto. So one of the primary ways that the official plan manages change is through land use designations. And so a land use designation basically says, this is where housing can be located, this is where employment can be located, this is where stores should be located. And in the case of the Malvern Town Centre, the land is designated mixed use. So what that means is that the official plan provides the policy permission for residential and commercial on that site. So right now, residential permissions are not permitted on the land because of the zoning bylaw, and that is part of the reason why the applicant is seeking to amend the zoning bylaw. But the official plan is kind of important because it tells us that these mixed-use areas are anticipated to accommodate a lot of the growth that Toronto might see in the future, or is anticipated to see in the future. So then lastly, just I'll quickly go over to the zoning bylaw. So where the official plan really charts the vision for the future, the zoning bylaw is really the nuts and bolts of what's permitted on site today. It's generally not very forward-looking. It regulates the height, the feel, the overall shape of buildings. And generally speaking, it changes through zoning bylaw amendments, which we are here talking about tonight. Most important thing about a zoning bylaw is it has to implement that official plan direction. And then as well, we have a few guidelines. I won't go into too much detail about them, but we have some guidelines that we follow for design of buildings, which essentially is intended to ensure that development is orderly and provides a really good public realm, provides a livable city. So some of the guidelines that we'd be looking at in evaluating this application is the low-rise apartment guidelines, mid-rise guidelines, as well as tall building design guidelines. And in fact, there are so many mall redevelopments now in Toronto that we actually do have a mall redevelopment guide. So that's something we would be looking to guide us through the different phases that are proposed, and as well to just ensure that we have some precedent that we can look at to ensure that, if this application is approved, we would be employing some success stories from previous sites. So that brings me to, the city's goals and objectives. So the official plan really provides us with that blueprint for the different priorities and goals for a site like this. As I had mentioned, goals for transit, housing, public realm, built form, parks, and other factors that support building a good city of Toronto. So I'll just quickly touch on some of the opportunities and priorities that we've been advocating for on this site since the applicant submitted their application about 15 months ago. So really, this is a master planning exercise to establish a new neighborhood. And I really want to emphasize the importance of this consultation and your input, as we are curating and drafting a set of policies that are for the small site and the surrounding community. As I'd mentioned, they're proposing to basically build a brand new neighborhood, so your input's critical. So in communicating our priorities to the applicant, we need to consider what are the critical elements of building a brand new neighborhood. So to date, the City of Toronto has provided feedback to the landowner on the first submission that they've provided us, which was in June 2022. I'll just quickly touch on those. So the very first thing we said to them is preserving the mall's retail and commercial function and its service to the community is top of mind. I know there's approximately 62 stores in the mall today. They're a very important component of the community, and the master plan needs to contain enough retail space in some type of format to ensure that there's an opportunity for those stores, as well providing ability for people to continue to be able to access those services in a really convenient way. So speaking about public realm and parks, preserving the retail and commercial function of the mall does present an opportunity to create a place for people to gather and walk and shop in Malvern. So there is an opportunity through this proposal to create a main street in Malvern where that retail and commercial can continue to be present. So that's something that we have been advocating for. If this application does go forward, 5,700 units is about 10,000 new people. So those people will need open space, park space, places to gather, places to shop. And that's something that we've really highlighted as important for the applicant to consider in their application. And as part of that, there is a central park proposed in the heart of the master plan, and that is something that the city has been supportive of. We also look at built form. So we seek to ensure that, if the mall redevelops, it has to be at an appropriate level of density that is supportable based on the existing context, as well as from a servicing and infrastructure perspective. So, is there enough water? Is there enough capacity in the sewer system to accommodate 10,000 new residents? So that's very important. 3 more things. Transit, we want the future Eglinton East LRT to be taken into consideration. This needs to be a transit-oriented development, not a transit-adjacent to development. So we would want to see the built form and the public realm really accommodate that notion. Housing, so this is a very big site, as I had mentioned. It's about the size of 15 soccer fields. It's designated mixed-use areas. The City of Toronto and its official plan expects a site this big to do a lot more than store cars and shop, and providing places to shop in terms of supporting housing. So we're looking to use the tools that we have in the official plan and the different legislative tools that we have to pursue housing, particularly affordable and rental housing on site. And then lastly, equity and community. So equity and community are at the heart of Malvern. The policies in this master plan would really need to reflect that social dimension. So we've been communicating to the applicant that the project needs to be designed in a way so that services like Taibu and the Native Child and Family Services facility do not miss a day of operations. So the proposal does need to ensure that there is space for these critical community services that we've heard so much about since we've embarked on this application process. So this is my last slide. At the end of this process, city planning looks at those 4 baskets that I spoke about, and we consider the different city building objectives that we could potentially achieve on a site like this. So we consider everything I've highlighted in the last 15 minutes or so of this presentation. And eventually we make a recommendation to Community Council in the form of a staff report. So that final report would speak to whether the City of Toronto and the Planning Division can support the application. So just to be clear, we receive an application, we evaluate it based on everything I've talked about tonight. I personally write a report with my colleagues. It goes to council. Council would then render a decision based on city planning's advice. And as part of that process, we want to ensure that there's a robust engagement process, and it's important to hear from you because you live in the area and you are the experts. So that's essentially the last step in the process. And that's all I have. Thank you for listening to me and for your patience. So now we're going to move into the applicant's presentation for the evening for about 15 minutes. They'll walk us through their vision for the site, and then we're actually going to move to a question and answer period in about 15 or 20 minutes. Thank you. So we're in a hybrid environment, so just excuse us for a moment. We just have to take a bit of 30 seconds to do a bit of technical changing, computer swaps.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Andrew Franchik. I'm a planning consultant with the applicant. Just give me a moment, please, to set up my WebEx so that we can get this going. And thank you, Samuel, for your presentation. Thank you. Once again, good evening, everyone. Samuel did an excellent job of doing a preamble and providing some information about the planning context. So I'll be very brief. Our presentation will be a two-part presentation, starting with myself just making a few comments, and then I'll hand it over to Johnny Ria from Arcadis Architects. And Johnny will walk you through the various plans for the community, and then we'll go into the question and answer period. So I'll just flip to the next slide and introduce, how does that work? Oops. My apologies for this. Just at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a number of different firms listed. So as part of any application process, landowners are required to prepare a number of different studies, and they need a number of different experts in order to do that. One of those is myself as a planning expert. We are the ones that coordinate and guide the process with the architects to make the application submission. And what we do is have numerous meetings with city planning staff. We enter into dialogues with communities like we're doing tonight. And then we modify the proposal as appropriate and move it through the various steps that Samuel described. So listed at the bottom of this screen, you'll see all the various disciplines that are required to move a large project like this forward. And it's comprised of architects, landscape architects, and various engineering experts in transportation, servicing engineering, and other disciplines like wind. So all of those different inputs have been incorporated into the application that you see. And I'll just talk about a couple of those things. Just rewinding back to 2021, this application has about a 2+ year history right now. It started with several rounds of discussions with the city even before the application was submitted. Some of that consultation occurred with the local councillor as well, Councillor McKelvey and others. And that led to an application submission that was about 14 months ago. And since that time, there have been a number of different steps that have occurred. And one of those that members in this auditorium may have already attended were the in-person open house sessions that we held in the mall at the beginning of this year in the winter. And so we held an in-person approximately 2 to 3 week period where we had members of our team attend on a daily basis and provide some information on the application to members of the community. And hopefully that was helpful in helping to explain what the proposal is all about, and making sure that the questions that people had about something this large were well informed. In addition to that, we also, as you can see on this chart going off to the right-hand side, held a meeting with the design review panel. The City of Toronto has a design panel that reviews these types of applications to ensure that it's almost peer reviewed and that a good design comes out at the other end of this. And we've also had a number of different meetings after we submitted with City Planning, with our colleagues at City Planning, to move this forward. So there's been a lot of dialogue. There's going to be more dialogue moving forward, but we're very excited about getting to the next steps, which is we're hoping at the approval of the first phase of development and then the vision for the entire site. I'll skip over these planning slides because Samuel did a great job of covering that. And in terms of the context here, he did a great job of that as well. I'll say that the transit was one of the big drivers of this development. This is a large site, as Samuel noted, and it can accommodate a significant amount of new housing, jobs, and also institutional uses and community services. And last but not least, very importantly, a very large park, which would be about 4.3 acres in size. That would increase the size of McLevin Woods Park and create sort of a central hub within this community. So we're really hopeful that it can be sort of organizing feature around which all these buildings can sort of focus. So with that, I'll hand it over to Johnny, if you wouldn't mind coming up. And we'll be here, of course, afterwards to speak to any questions that anyone has. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Good evening, everyone. My name is Johnny Ria. I'm a principal with Arcadis Architects. We are responsible for the architectural design of the scheme in front of you tonight. I'd like to mention that this scheme is the result of 2 years of very constructive review process with city staff, and we are certainly welcoming any comment coming from the community tonight that would improve the scheme and bring it to the next stage of approval. I believe that the current scheme is very close to achieve the objective of both the city planning and the applicant as well. The overall scheme that I'm going to present tonight could be overwhelming in terms of scale and complexity. I'd like to point out that this is not going to happen overnight. I'm going to show you during the presentation that we are projecting about 10 different phases over time, and each one of the phases, depending on the approval level, is going to take 2 to 3 years, depending on the amount of density on the specific parcel of land. So in this, I believe, and my team believes, that this is good planning. We're not coming in with just one parcel at a time. We're looking for a vision for the old block that is going to be projected in the next 20 years in view of the investment of the new transit line, which is going certainly to justify additional density, and in view of a parcel of land that is certainly underutilized, is showing a very suburban typology at a time in a city that is rapidly expanding and certainly requires additional injection of population. So this, again, is something that is going to happen over a long period of time. The other objective that our team has is to build a community. A community that, and you probably heard this expression before, a community that can live, work, and play within very few city blocks. Very much a European style that is going to take away the dependency from the car and is going to create opportunities for the local population to live and operate within a very small area. So this is certainly something that my team is aiming for, and hopefully this scheme is going to show the intent. So how do you build this community? First of all, we have an injection of mixed use. It's not going to be only a single use. There's going to be a mix of residential. There's going to be condominium, going to be rental, it's going to be most likely a component of affordable housing that needs to be discussed with city official and the councillor. There's going to be a commitment to replace the existing non-residential uses, in particular the shopping mall. So the retail which is existing right now on the site. It will be replaced over time with a different typology that I'm going to show you shortly, but very much in terms of size and opportunities for different businesses to grow is going to be reproduced in the future scheme, including some of the institution, the medical center, everything again is going to be replaced in the property blocks that we are suggesting. The plan that you have in front of you is the master plan. Is showing the heavy black dotted line, is showing the extent of the site that is controlled by my client. We don't control the northeast corner, which I believe is a recently built storage facility. Of course, the McLevin Wood Park was not part of our original footprint. And there is a recently approved townhouse development to the west side of the block. So our first approach, again, the first approach was how we're going to break up this large city block in more manageable, buildable blocks. So the first thing is the introduction of a network of boulevard. So we're going to have a north-south and east-west very strong mid-block connection that are going to allow for the pedestrian rail to succeed, with vehicular traffic to penetrate to the site. And again, each one of the block will provide for retail opportunity on the ground floor and will provide for certainly, in particular, the 23-meter right-of-way, which is shown on the drawings, and the 23-meter right-of-way, which is dissecting the site north-south, is going to provide for major arterial traffic boulevard where car, bicycle, and pedestrian will share harmoniously the right-of-way. So the first was to establish this first layer of street, and there's going to be a hierarchy which I'm going to go through later in the presentation. Major street with boulevard, cyclable areas, and so on and so forth. The second street, which is feeding a north-south connection, allowing pedestrian, again, to find their way to the block towards the north, very much similar to what's happening right now. And then you have a third layer, which is a smaller 12-meter, we refer to as the Woonerf, which is a nicely paved area, which is going to be shared between pedestrian and vehicular traffic, and is going to provide servicing to the block, access to the underground parking, access to the loading facility for garbage disposal, and so on and so forth, which are going to be away from the pedestrian traffic. It's going to be nicely screened inside of the respective blocks. In terms of the other initiative, there's going to be, again, as I mentioned, a mixed use, multiple uses. There's going to be also multiple build forms. We assigned a higher density and the tallest tower in connection with the intersection of Nielsen and Tapscott. We understand and we're coordinating that effort with a future rapid transit system that is going to be built in this area. And certainly, we want to build a transit-oriented community that is going to make full use of the transit facility that are going to be available to the public in the future. So higher density along the major intersection and potential stop for the rapid transit system. We certainly took the opportunity to expand the McLevin Wood lot to the south. We are contributing about 17,000 square meters of park dedication, fully dedicated to the public, and that becomes actually a focal point of the development. That becomes like a central park that is going to be the organizer for all the other built forms around the block. In terms of the build form, again, we have a variety of build form. We have a podium structure, which varies from 4 to 6 stories. On top of the structure, you have different tower height. And as the build form proceeds toward the west, in particular along McLevin, we're suggesting the 3-story townhouse block would be more appropriate to create a transition between the stable residential district north of McLevin and the higher density that we're suggesting to the south and along Tapscott. This is a 3-dimensional representation of just the ground floor plan. Again, the vehicular circulation is highlighted by the gray right of way. And this is representative of what a pedestrian would experience at the ground floor. The yellow diagrams is showing the retail frontages onto the street. The other colors are representing other institutional work, replacement of some of the current institution on the site, including the medical center. It's showing the injection of potential daycare in close proximity to the park. The extended park that I mentioned before that is going to become the central element organizing the site. And the remainder of the back of the house and necessary room to service the building in terms of the underground parking and in terms of the pickup facility for garbage and moving. They're going to be fully integrated within the build form away from the pedestrian traffic. This is a computer generated perspective view of one of these boulevards. It's a cross section against a 23-meter right of way. Again, there is plenty of opportunity to assign a proper sidewalk dimension, a bicycle track, the boulevard condition with mature trees, and the vehicular traffic. The build form along this would be 4 to 6 story, and again, it's going to be in proportion and certainly in scale with the pedestrian use. The towers will be properly set back from the podium, and that will reach height depending on the location within the site. And again, trying to create a transition between major arterial traffic and more sensitive area like McLevin, where a lower density is envisioned. As I mentioned before, this is not going to happen overnight. We're considering 10 phases, starting from the very top left, phase 1. Phase 1 is considering just the block, which is on the northwest quadrant of Nielsen and Tapscott. A 2-tower scheme is proposed with a gateway, a pedestrian gateway, which is going to allow for the flux of the pedestrian traffic through the block into the existing mall. As you can see, the first image is assuming that no changes to the existing mall are considered. There will be a small loss of surface parking, which I understand from our traffic studies not to create any substandard service of the existing mall. So for the first, I would say, depending on all the timing of the approval process, assuming that we're going to get to that level of approval, for the first 3 to 4 years, the mall is not going to be altered. Phase 2, the proposal is moving to the northbound along Nielsen. The part of the mall will be demolished. The western portion of the mall will be retained, in particular the food store will be still kept in place with the proper surface parking and the proper servicing in the back. Additional park dedication will be allocated south of the McLevin woodlot as a natural extension of that green area. It was natural for us to assign and dedicate that sort of land to certainly enhance and basically expand the existing woodlot on the site. As we proceed to the third phase, again, we're expanding the build form to the north. We are adding we're starting to add the north-south and east-west vehicular traffic to the site. The partially retained mall will still be on site, and the additional park dedication will be assigned at this stage. The medical center will still be there in the current location. So again, we're looking at several years down the road. The mall, although partially retained, will still be there. We're looking into the phase 4 now, back to the diagram. And at this stage, we may be considering the full demolition of the mall. But at this stage, the block into phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 will be already compensating and replacing some of the institution and some of the retail that has been taken away from the mall. Phase 4 and 5, they're pretty much self-explanatory. The vehicular traffic is going to be expanded to include the east-west and the north-south. And the build form will now be expanded along Tapscott. Similarly, for phase 7, 8, 9, and again, there's going to be some flexibility in terms of the timing. We're looking at many, many years down the road. So the allocation of some of the services can be shifted and can be negotiated between different blocks depending on the needs at the time. So we have been looking at the overall master plan in 2D. Now we're looking at extrusion, again, a computer-generated image of the proposed height and density on the site. You can see the central park, which is creating, again, this transition between the east portion of the site and the west, and the different height of the tower above the podium, which is going to certainly reflect the higher density at the major intersection of Nielsen and Tapscott, and going down as proceed to the west into lower density, but still providing a consistent datum at podium level for the pedestrian experience. This is a view along McLevin looking east. This is showing the relationship between the 3-story townhouses that we're proposing on McLevin. Again, a transition that is provided between the higher density and higher build form along the south portion of the site. And this build form is very much in keeping with the scale and proportion of the existing townhouses on McLevin. So there's a transition that certainly is being incorporated in our scheme. I was talking about the different layers. So this is the vehicular traffic showing the hierarchy, the different width, the 23 meter of the blue, the major artery north and south, and the two different lower hierarchy of street, depending on whether it's just a mid-block connection or whether it's actually just a VUNERV, which is going to be servicing the inner part of the block and the service area for the different ground floor activities. The details of each one of these different right-of-way is indicated on this drawing. Again, the vignette that you saw, the computer-generated image, is very much trying to capture how the pedestrian would feel in that kind of environment. The largest sidewalks will provide opportunity for spillage of the retail activities into the street. You will have plenty of opportunities for green spaces to be provided along the way, and the proper space for the bikes and the proper space for the vehicular traffic. The lower two diagrams are showing the specific dimension for each one of these different road proposed. Private roads are referred to as a VUNERV. Again, these are pedestrian accessible, publicly accessible. They will allow for the pedestrian traffic and vehicular traffic to basically travel through the blocks and allowing, again, easy pedestrian connection and servicing at the same time of the back of the house facilities. These are not back alleys. They are going to be fully landscaped. They're going to be properly treated day and night. They're going to be servicing as a real street. So we're paying a lot of attention to the landscape design. These, again, are going to be looking like service lane. They're going to be very much welcoming the public and the traffic at the same time. Different edges. Again, these are one of the different layers that we are considering for the proposal. Attention was given to the landscaping, rail, pedestrian ability to use the sidewalk, spillage of cafes, restaurant, and so on and so forth. Very much something that for some of you, if you're familiar with the shop at Don Mills, that's a very good example in Toronto how that kind of relationship with the ground floor retail can be spilling into the outside and create opportunities for, again, a great pedestrian environment. This is a diagram that is showing in particular the proposed landscape plan. As you can see, the amount of green space is considerable. We're committed certainly within the 23-meter right of way, the boulevard that are dissecting the side north, south, and east, west to provide opportunities for mature trees to be planted, proper sidewalk width, and of course the 17,000 square meter park, Central Park. The Central Park will be certainly subject to review by city staff, and I'm sure that the programming of that Central Park will be shared with the community. City staff will be looking for community input in what kind of structure and what kind of activities could take place in that location. The Central Park, again, there was the location and the expansion of the park was a natural resolution on the existing location of the woodlot. So we took that as an opportunity to start this green initiative that is starting from the north of the site, run right across north-south, creating this buffer and this great pedestrian connection between the north and the south, away from the traffic and away from the build form. Again, the programming, there are many different options, and I'm sure that the community will have a say into the kind of activities. To the bottom of the presentation, again, this is a computer image taken like an aerial view from McLevin, how the combination of the woodlot, the existing woodlot, combined with the additional 17,000 square meter addition to the south would look like within the build form. In terms of, again, an additional layer of activities and different uses, in addition to the full dedicated park, we're proposing 2 locations for publicly accessible but privately owned plaza. In particular, the one at the south corner is part of phase 1, and it creates a gateway, a pedestrian gateway to the rest of the site. Still during phase 1 and phase 2, we'll provide access from the Envision light rapid transit stop along Nielsen, and we provide a welcoming great gateway to the inner block and to the park in the future phase of many years from now. The image to the top right, again, is a computer perspective suggesting how this outdoor plaza would look like in the future. And again, is certainly intended to welcome the pedestrian and to channel them into the inner portion of the future block. The lower two images, again, are trying to intend to create, recreate the atmosphere and the full intention to expand the activities of the ground floor into the streetscape to become part of that kind of environment. During the, let's say that the pedestrian experience through the block, besides the boulevard condition, the intermediate connection and the VU-nerve to the block, the pedestrian will have also access to the courtyards of each one of these blocks. The courtyards are going to show two different kind of environment. One is a private and the other one is public. There will be a joint during this journey through the different blocks proceeding north or south. They will have the opportunity to enjoy fully landscaped courtyard. Some of them will be available for usage, and some of them will be actually part of the requirement for private amenity space that will be for the exclusive use of the tenants. And the location will be some on the ground floor, some will be on the rooftop of the 6-story podium level that I was mentioning. So the footprint of the tower will be much smaller compared to the footprint of the podium, and leaving the opportunity for rooftop green initiative and outdoor amenity space. And again, we're showing here some of the examples from other projects where the rooftop actually becomes a very active space. It's going to respond to some of the green initiative and is going to create, again, animation 24 hours a day. And again, an additional layer of all the different initiatives that I mentioned during the presentation. This is just overall summary of the process that we went through in review also with the city. The evolution of the scheme is also leading to the current proposal, which is actually an option to eliminate part of the 23-meter east-west dissecting the block, creating a more homogeneous and uninterrupted park. This is something that is being considered by the team, is being discussed with the city. It is certainly up for discussion as part of the ongoing review process. And I think that's the last presentation for the architectural part. Thank you.
Sorry, can you grab your computer? Sorry about that, everyone. We're doing a hybrid meeting, so there are about 50 or so people online also watching. So you'll just have to excuse our little bit of technical hiccups here. This is all new to us. So yeah, thank you so much for your patience. We're going to move to our question and answer portion of the evening, the facilitated discussion. So for people in the audience, if you're comfortable, you can raise your hand to ask a question. You can just speak out loud, or we do have a microphone too. If you're comfortable to use it, it's completely at your discretion. If you're not comfortable to speak in, a public forum like this, happy to speak with you afterwards, one-on-one, after the meeting is finished. As well, we have, I believe, people have the opportunity to ask questions online as well. There's a question and answer portion chat. So if we don't get any questions here, I can read some questions out from the chat as well. So unless anybody has like an immediate question right now that they'd like to raise, then happy to, yeah, please go ahead. No need to go there, but you can, it's up to you, whatever you're comfortable with.
Here in the 80s, and my husband grew up Is it not on? Yeah.
They'll turn on the microphone just a
Okay.
moment. Thank you.
It's on? Thank you. Thank you. My husband grew up in the area since a child, and I moved here in the 80s. And back then, there was a lot of talk of the radioactive soil. And in the 90s, they had at Malvern Mall some booths set up telling about where it was, where the soil was moved from. And again, this isn't about me or my husband, but in the meantime, he developed thyroid cancer. And at Sunnybrook Hospital, they were pretty definite that he, as a child, played in the soil area, which is all around the mall. He knows more, McClure Crescent, different areas here. And I just wondered in phase 4, when the park comes into place and the mall starts to be dismantled, for the safety of people in the area, will that soil be tested thoroughly? Especially for young families and older people that are prone to, the main one is thyroid cancer. And the mall was put up after, Jeff, or before? The mall was put up before the soil was tested in the area. So there's a good possibility there's parking lot, the mall, the little park area you're talking about. They have moved the soil, not to, you said Chalk River? It's
Yeah.
just down Tapscott. But it was a big concern in the 80s and 90s. And some of the homes in the area don't have basements due to that. And they came and tested our home too. And we had a bit, but he said it was natural from bricks and things like that. But I'm really concerned about the community and other families. So I'm just hoping, would they test that? Who would I talk to about it? I have the report at home that explains where it came from and the map where it was all dropped off and cleared up. But there's probably potentially still quite a bit in the area that was built over before they found out about it. So I don't know where to go from there, but who should I talk to about that?
So thank you so much for sharing your story and for the question. Thank you for standing up in front of everybody as well and sharing that story.
Hi, my name is Jeff Brown, and I've been here since 1971. Several different occasions, politicians have come in and said, hey, we're bringing you a subway. Well, I'm an old man now. There's still no subway. Before another promise is made, well, we're going to put these up, and your candy is we're going to give you a LRT or a subway or whatever you decide to do. That should be put in the ground so we see it, touch it, and feel it before any of this stuff is developed. Another concern that I have right now is you sit in your car. So I don't know what's going to happen with 4,000 residents times how many cars they have are sitting here. They go through our subdivisions because Shepherd's is bumper to bumper. So what can the law do to slow the traffic down so they don't run over our children in the neighborhoods? And that's my question.
It was Jeff, right? Thank you, Jeff. Do you mind if I respond to, I didn't catch, oh, you're Jeff, your wife, I'm sorry. I didn't catch your name, but we'll go to that and then we'll go to your comment, Jeff, about the parking and the traffic. So I'm absolutely not the expert when it comes to radioactive material. I understand that the mall was, I believe, built in the 70s and the radioactive material wasn't McClure Crescent, I think, was 1980 when they had found that. And then in 1995, Ontario Housing had discovered it. They excavated 60 properties. And then I believe the radioactive material, some of it was transferred to Chalk River and then some to Passmore. Obviously, that doesn't answer your question. That's kind of my extent of the knowledge. But my understanding would be there would be some type of provincial, possibly even federal requirement for soil testing in that case. It's a, so it would, I mean, the the burden would fall on the city to ask for those testing requirements, like as part of any sort of application. So for example, let's say this was a former landfill site. The city gets applications on. Okay. Sure. Yeah, sure. If you give me a moment here.
Malvern Mall, there is a cement bridge that goes underneath Tapscott. So that used to be an actual dirt road, and that dirt road would just go straight through the parking lot.
Yeah,
Right beside where they're building currently those new homes to the left, and the grocery stores
yeah.
in the mall in the corner. So that farmer would go all the way down. There used to be train tracks down the end, and there was a wooden bridge, and he was just dumping this stuff off into the fields. And also it was all farmers' fields. So it would go over towards Nielsen, I guess, which is this entire area here. Now, it affects your thyroid, so you don't really know much about it. There's no pain associated with it. I did lose my voice for 1 year. The doctor took a nerve out of my shoulder and constructed a new vocal cord. So you hear my voice a little raspy. I wouldn't want anybody else to go through. It's not necessary. But the land, especially the guys that are working there, a lot of the new homes that are being built in the area have no basements. The government knew about it. They just decided to leave it, I guess. Not sure. But anyways, thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Apologies, the microphone was off. Yeah, thank you so much, Jeff. I mean, I believe that so regarding like a soil gas assessment, for example, we require soil gas assessments all the time for contaminated land. I've just personally not encountered radioactive, but are you aware or? Yeah, yes, there's a book about it. I think it's the Citizen's Guide to Malvern. Apologies for
I
that.
don't want to take everyone's time. I'm just asking, does anyone on the panel know about the history of this? Because it's going to be in other areas around here.
The first time I heard about this was today. That's the truth. And that's something that obviously is a serious issue, and we would not take it lightly. But it's also something that I think is a little bit apart from the process that we're talking about today. The environmental aspects of any site are dealt with through studies, regardless of what zoning process has gone through as well. So that's something that we imagine. I'm certainly not an expert in that area. I don't think Gianni is either, but it's something that our team will think about.
Ahead, and I'm not being rude, how you can go ahead and do this without looking into that first. And I am talking for the families in the area. That's how he got it. They knew about it. He played in that land from 5 up until about 14. He saw people testing the soil. No one said anything. That land stood empty for years. Now they're building again. So to say that, I don't know how you can go forward till it's checked before you build anything. Young children, elderly are at risk, and anybody low to the ground. That's why some homes don't have basements.
We're here and the city is here taking notes, so thank you.
We can discuss after. Hi.
Marie Clark Walker, I want to thank you, first of all, to bringing that to our attention. And the reason that I raised people coming to the microphone is because there are a lot of people who have moved into the community that don't know about that issue. The other thing I want to raise before I ask my question or make my comment is the slides that you're showing with this vast room most people, and you guys can tell me if I'm wrong, can't see that. You have a big wall behind you. It could, I understand that people online need to see, but you could have done that screen and then done it on the big wall because, sorry, sir, your presentation went way over because people couldn't see what you were talking about. And I know that most people are not getting up, but I'm seeing the head shaking, right? The other thing that I want to bring to the attention, not just around accessibility, because we have a large population that is senior, to be able to, with all these phases, to be able to access the things that they continuously access. But we also have Indigenous graves on this land. And I don't want to be anybody who digs up and finds out that this is where a grave was. So all of those, that due diligence really needs to be done before we even start talking about or looking at putting a shovel in a ground.
Thank you so much for your comments. I'll just quickly respond if that's okay. I'll just quickly say, the screen is definitely too small. We are aware of that. I'm terribly sorry. This is the first time we've done an in-person meeting since COVID. We also were trying to accommodate people that wanted to connect virtually as much as possible. We'll make the slides available after online. If you want a printed copy because you don't use a computer, please get in touch with me. We can mail you a printed copy as well of the slides from this presentation. I'll just quickly respond to the question about Indigenous graves. So an archaeological assessment is always required as part of an application where they might find sensitive remains. So that has been submitted as part of this application. Thank you. Bye.
Hi there, my name is Francis Mangera, and I have been a part of the community for like maybe 15 years more. I have two questions, but all kind of towards transit. It seems like the crux of this transit plan is around the Eglinton LRT and that extending it to Malvern. It doesn't seem from the slides that I second her. I could not see, I had to move up, and even then the points were so small. I feel like it's kind of an injustice to us because it feels like we need to do a second session with the same material, because how are they supposed to form questions and opinions if we can't really see or understand the presentation? But anyways, it seems like that hasn't been confirmed, and we all know how fast the Eglinton LRT is being implemented. Like, it's not coming, right? So what happens if that planned or not planned proposal of the Malvern LRT getting extended doesn't go through? And my second question is, what does TTC transit service look like throughout the phases? Because I don't know about you guys, but my entire family uses the TTC to get throughout the city, mainly towards the downtown core or just towards the central part of Toronto, whether that's north or south. The loss of the Scarborough RT has been huge for our family, and that adds on 15, 20 minutes both ways, almost like an hour of your life kind of be impacted by that. So with this new transit, or with this new proposed plan, what does that, like, do we have a plan for that, about how TTC transit will evolve throughout the phases? How long will it last? What will be impacted? And can we get more service in these kind of areas currently and in the future if we're also expecting a higher density of over 10,000 new residents coming into our community? Thanks.
It's Francis, right? Thank you, Francis. I'll just take a quick opportunity to respond. So the Eglinton East LRT, it of course is separate from this process. It's a plan that the city is embarking on. I believe they're now at a 10% design stage. It's largely unfunded. So, well, actually it is unfunded. So you're completely correct in the sense that, if you're bringing in 10,000 new people, they need to be able to move around. And buses aren't going to cut it, right? Like, I completely understand and appreciate that.
Sorry, so what if that doesn't happen? Like, are we planning to build this while that whole Eglinton LRT is still kind of being planned? Because like, it seems like it's the crux, again, like the most pivotal point of this plan. So like, what happens if that doesn't go through? So we're kind of just, left to buses and you know.
Get the microphone on? Thanks. So as part of the consultation that we did, it was in one of the slides and I recognize that it's way too small. But one of the things that we did several times, in fact, was meet with the Eglinton LRT group that's building it at Metrolinx. And they're actually quite excited that this is coming forward because it actually creates the case for having the LRT and getting the funding that they need. When we first started the project over 2 years ago, they were at around the 5% design mark. So that's quite low. But the last time we met with them a few months ago, they were beyond the 10% design mark. And so they are progressing in the design of it. We're seeing transit being built all over the city now. The Finch West LRT was talked about for years. It's now there. I think it's actually going to open before Eglinton, believe it or not, even though it started many years later. Because it's a surface line as well, the Eglinton LRT, I imagine, will be built faster, much like the Finch West LRT. Finch West LRT was built only in about 3 years. Eglinton LRT is longer, but it doesn't have the challenge of going underground through a dense part of the city. Our office is right in the middle of Yonge and Eglinton, where the LRT has been built for 12 years now, and it's still being built. So we understand the challenge of that. In terms of the timing and sequencing of this development, as Johnny was saying, he had a bunch of phasing slides up, which were impossible to read. I understand that. But simply put, even the first phase, if it was approved today, would not be built for 3 years. And that's if it was approved today. It won't be approved today. So it's likely 5 years away before the even first phase on the parking lot develops. And then for the subsequent phases, we're looking at 7, 10, 15, 20 years plus. We're very hopeful that the LRT would come by that point. But that being said, there are triggers and mechanisms that the city can use to sort of deal with that through the planning process. But we fully are designing this as if the LRT was coming because we believe that is the right way to undertake a planning exercise, to not to sort of pair it together with the transit.
Just to be clear, yeah, thank you, Francis. It's part of when we review an application, we look at everything. So transit's a big part of this equation. So the applicant submitted based on the idea that the LRT would be here to support moving around 10,000 new residents. It's part of one factor we look at, and proposing 10,000 new residents without the LRT is definitely something that we have flagged to them through the first submission. So we're in very early stages at this point, but we've raised that issue as well because it's at a 10% design right now and it's unfunded. I think we have quite a few more people. Hi.
Can you hear me? My name is Pamela Fell. I've written a few emails and letters to people. Samuel, is your last name Barron?
Yeah.
Okay, I've written to you. I have some huge concerns about this new plan. We've been here for at least 45 years or more. We're in phase 3. And I was so happy when Malvern Mall was built and, it was like the heart of the community. And, I just, it was really nice to have it there. I understand we have to progress, but when I heard that there might be 10 high-rise buildings, it just freaked me out. I walked along Nielsen before coming here. It's like a jam-packed with traffic. How in the world, 10,000 new residents we're talking about eventually? What are they going to do with the roads? How are the roads going to handle that? We're talking about public transit, but many people will have cars. And have they planned for that? And I was looking at the little roads in there. I could just see them trying to get out of there because of the traffic on the main streets. I don't get it. And the stores, I wonder what kind of stores there'll be. Like that Foodland is really nice. I'm for progress, but I also am for community. And I don't want it to be another Flemington Park with tons of people. They want housing and people to have housing, but think of the community. And also, while this is being constructed, all of us will be affected. The roads are busy now. They're going to be like much worse while all this construction is going on. So those are some of my concerns, as you well know. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela. We do have 2 staff here from transportation. Khalid or Frank, if you're comfortable, would you mind responding to how the city looks at traffic flow from, you know, a population density perspective? Or I guess Ted?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ted Malkos. So part of any development, the city does request a transportation impact study, which the applicant did provide. That deals with traffic within the area, and it projects what traffic will look like in the future as well. That impact study is available. It does illustrate that the traffic in the area doesn't necessarily illustrate that there will be any major changes due to the other modes of transportation. Sorry, the other modes of transportation that will be available, taking into account the Eglinton East LRT, walking, cycling infrastructure that will be built as well. Sorry, the lady just asked me if it was done before. The traffic impact study was submitted in June of 2022.
Thank you, Ted. Andrew, would you like to comment?
Comment.
Yeah, please go ahead, Andrew. That was Ted from the City of Toronto. Thank you, Ted.
I'll just put my spin on it from the planning perspective, and I fully realize the difficulty in understanding how you can add so many people while not dramatically increasing the traffic situation. The reality is this neighborhood is currently planned around the car. Malvern Mall has a huge parking lot. It's built for people to drive to it. And what's different about what will be proposed, there will be growing pains. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But at the end of the day, it will be an urban community where you can walk and it will be inconvenient to drive because that will be the design. And that is not a failure of the design. That is an aspect of it. It's by design that it will be a walkable area where there won't be as much parking as there is today, and a place that you can ride your bicycle. We have bicycle lanes that are incorporated into it. All of that is the city's new standard to not encourage people to drive as much. And so that is where we're trying to take this community.
Just have a,
Go ahead.
the way the transit is being built now is like sludge. It's so slow. I'd be amazed if it finished in 30 years. I'm not kidding. Look at downtown Union Station and Eglinton, all that. Also, you have to consider people with disabilities, wheelchairs and things like that. You're talking about bikes and walking, but what about people with disabilities? There's so much to think about with this. So I'm really community minded, and looking at those 10 tall buildings is just freaking me out. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela.
Our seniors are very important. My name is Bev Dixon, and I'm one of the Malvern Mall Walkers. Hey, Malvern Mall Walkers people. Now, we have been walking, many people have been walking around in the mall. They allow us to get in early, it's about 7:30. We exercise, we socialize, and it's very important that we maintain our health and well-being. It's very important. So I'm wondering, is there any place or any consideration being given to Malvern Mall walkers to have a spot where we can continue to exercise and be with our people? It's very, very important to us. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. The city is not proposing the application, so I'm going to ask the applicant to respond to that question.
Sure. So there will be no mall at the end of the day. So I'm hopeful, and don't be mad at me for saying this. I hope the Malvern Mall walkers become the new park walkers, because the park currently doesn't exist. And so currently what we're hoping is to turn it into the central amenity. So whereas today there's a private amenity that is open certain hours and does allow for recreation, At the end of the day, there will be public squares, there will be a new park, there will be better places to walk and go shopping, much like an area of downtown. For instance, walking along Queen Street, looking at shops. Those are the types of environments that this plan aims to create. It's dramatically different than what's there today. There's no question. Very different, but we're hoping it's a better different.
Hello, so my name is Stacy Berry. I went to junior high school and elementary here. So I have concerns that are not just, it's more than the mall for the community, it's the services. They have an employment service, they have Taibu, they have health services. I have a senior dad, when he gets his blood work, he can just easily go there. And so I know you're comparing it to shops in the Daw Mills, but you have to make sure you consider the demographic analysis. What is the average of the income people who are on government assistance versus these areas you're comparing it to? Like there's a high unemployment rate. There's a lot of youth who are living here. So in your plan, what percentage is rental stock, not affordable housing where people have to buy it and they claim it's lower? Like I'm talking new rental buildings. Are there any? Are there going to be any health services, or are all the existing health services within the Malvern Mall property going to be demolished? There's also a medical clinic, and health inequities in these neighborhoods are important. And so we don't want to heighten inequities. We don't want to make it more difficult for people to have access for a place to live. So it's one thing to own a home, but we have issues with refugees. We have issues with students who are like sleeping apparently in libraries at UTSC Scarborough. And so there's some really serious issues where the social inequities in your plan should also be a priority.
Thank you for sharing. Would you like to respond?
I was just going to say, those are all excellent points. In terms of the question about rental housing versus condominiums, that decision hasn't been made yet. And typically in the projects that we work on, and I think Johnny too, those decisions aren't even made on a small project until closer to construction. And the reason is sometimes the financials have to be determined at a later point. So what is more appropriate? Is it rental? Is it condo? Is a decision that's left till much later in the process. And it could be that this community is actually a mixture of condo and rental, including affordable. And so that's the hope. Because it's such a long-term plan of over 20 years, we see that it's likely going to be a mix. And with the recent announcements that the province and the federal government has made about the HST rebate, if anyone has heard about that, that is, I'm hearing with our clients, quite an important change, which will start to encourage more rental development. So it could very well be that the first phases are rental. It could be that they're condo. It could be a mixture. And that's something that we'll continue to monitor throughout each phase as it develops. But it really is a long-term plan. So I can't tell you right now what it will be.
My name is Zahir Antia. I live in Mayfair on the Green. I see a couple of people are here tonight. We have 877 residential units in that complex, which is just on the northeast corner of Nielsen and McLevin. And we have a fairly decent amount of visitor parking there, but there are times every week when those visitor parking lots are absolutely chock full. Now, keeping in mind what you've said about wanting to have this development centered around public transit, that's all well and good. But 10,000 people are going to have a great many cars, a great many visitors. I didn't see any place for visitor parking in the diagrams that you showed us. Perhaps you're planning to park underground or something, but what effect is this going to have on the surrounding areas? Because people are going to have to park somewhere. If they're going to park in zones where they shouldn't be parking, or parking on other people's private property, that's going to be a huge problem. Also, as you point out, this is going to be a development that takes place over 20 or 30 years. And during that time, the residents of the area are going to have to put up with 20 or 30 years of construction, traffic, disruption, dust, noise, all the rest of it. So we are out here in Scarborough, and we're miles away from the center of the city. People over here need cars. They have cars. We don't have the luxury of relying solely on public transit or zip cars or other progressive forms of transportation. So I just think this is too many people for this area. And I hope consideration is given to cutting that number drastically. It's going to be, a very dominating, obtrusive development that just completely takes over the whole neighborhood, together with the fact that on the corner, which you're not responsible for, there's going to be basically a self-storage warehouse of 9 stories in height, right at the corner of Nielsen and McLevin. It's going to totally change the appearance of this neighborhood, and not for the better, I don't think. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Andrew, did you want to respond about the number of parking spaces?
Sure. Yeah, just very briefly. So yes, the visitor parking will be underground. So there will not be almost any surface parking in the new developments as they develop. And the plan is to actually meet the city's standards for visitor parking. The city actually has 0 parking requirement now for residential. So they've actually reduced that greatly in the last year. But there will still be parking even beyond that for residents and visitors.
Good evening. My name is Nigel Sandy. First, I just wanted to start by, Sam, recognizing you for being receptive and open to feedback. It's not easy being the first person to host a hybrid event coming out of the pandemic. I can appreciate that. Once upon a time, I was responsible for community engagement on the Scarborough subway extension. So thank you for trying to make this experience inclusive for everyone that's here. I do have a question, and I also want to appreciate the elected officials for being here and advocating for the preservation of some of our vital services, in particular the community centers that offer services to our residents. But I have a question in regards to the preservation of the retail and commercial spaces. Does the application identify the number of retail units that are planned in this proposal? Is there a specific criteria for the types of tenants that are going to be targeted? And then lastly, if the current tenants are not a part of that future plan, is the developer proposing financial resources to support the current tenants to find a relocation?
Thank you for sharing that. That's a very important comment. So just to be clear, the City of Toronto doesn't have the ability through a zoning bylaw to secure tenure. So we can't say this needs to be Taboo, this needs to be Shoppers Drug Mart, etc. So we would be looking to the goodwill of the applicant to ensure that those spaces are provided in order to ensure that there's a continuity of service for those important community services. So I'll ask Andrew and the applicant team to maybe speak to that a little bit.
Sure, and those are great comments. What we definitely want to create, and we're doing with phase 1 in particular, and we can share the plans with you if people want to come up and take a look. But phase 1 is the only phase so far, the first 2 towers at the corner, that are actually detail designed. The rest of the community is still very general, as you saw in Johnny's presentation, with those yellow areas that are shown as the retail. Those haven't been planned yet. They're just very general. What we do know is that one of those areas in the future will be the replacement supermarket. So we do know that there's that design already contemplated. But as far as phase 1, it's actually comprised of a number of different smaller retail spaces. Because the land is actually sloped as it kind of extends to the northwest, the pathway in between the buildings will actually have different levels, which will have different retail at different levels as you kind of walk down the path. And so that sort of topography will naturally create these smaller retail spaces. And we're hopeful that as the mall gets demolished in phases, that there are tenants in the mall that want to relocate. And I'm sure that our clients would be happy to lease the space. So would be happy to entertain that. As far as uses like Taboo, I know that came up in the last comment, and I just wanted to address that. We have specifically looked at relocating Taboo within the development in phase 4. So it's years and years off. That block won't be developed for probably over 10 years, if not more. And when it is, it would be a direct relocation to the new block so that there's sort of no net disruption that occurs. That's the intent of it. Same with any of the other uses like the doctors and all the other services. Presumably, they would want to stay in the community. Hopefully, they want to stay on the site and they're able to relocate directly from the mall. If, for instance, the lease ends and the new building is ready for occupancy, it would be great to have them move right back in. Because as I said, certainly the owners want to have those units tenanted.
Just say one thing, I apologize. We have about 11 questions from people online and we have 4 people lined up. So if we can, we'll go through the 4 people lined up as quickly as possible. And then so I'm explaining to what's happening to people watching at home. I'm going to do my best to get to your questions really quickly. We have about 4 people waiting to speak and then we'll maybe jump to some of the questions. I'll read them out loud after. Okay. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Gregory Wallace. And you touched on my question. It's with respect to Taibu. You mentioned that it will be moved in phase 4 and you're ideally looking for from where it is now to the new location. However, during phases 1 to 3, there will be significant disruption into how residents and the community will be able to access the services there, many of which are obviously relied upon. How do you plan and intend to allow for the community to continue to access Taibu undisrupted to allow the service to continue? Oh, sorry, part 2. Have you engaged with Taibu and do you plan to engage with Taibu in terms of how to accommodate to ensure service can continue?
No, excellent comments about Taibu. So the course of doing a site plan application, which is what we're doing for phase 1 right now, requires a construction management plan. So for instance, when that detailed plan goes into the city for more detailed review, which we hope is forthcoming after the zoning part is complete, we would need to demonstrate how the construction impacts would be mitigated. That includes on Taibu. So Taibu is located just to the west of the first phase of development. And the way that the first phase is designed, it's fully within that parking area, which is sort of at the corner, but it will not impact on Taibu or the parking area that's associated with it. Yes, I know the corner has some parking, but there will be other places to the north and to the west of Taibu, which would still remain as the parking spaces for Taibu. There's quite a lot of parking on the site, as everyone knows. And so there will be opportunity for that, but also walking access will continue to be there from the sidewalk, so it won't be impacted until the 4th phase when that block gets developed, and then Taibu would move to phase 3.
Hi. Just as a young person, I want to live in a city with a healthy housing supply where young people like myself can afford to rent or buy a home close to where family, friends, and or essential services are. I want to live. I want that to still be the case when I am older and have children of my own who are moving out and doing the same thing. I want to live in a city that actually doesn't just say it welcomes refugees, but actually has housing where they can afford to live. All of this is going to require a healthy housing supply that grows to match the increasing population of the city. I appreciate that people might have concerns about the loss of services, potential transit shortages, etc., and these should all be addressed. But I would like to express my support for adding more housing to this area. There's not a lot of land left available for redevelopment, especially if you want it close to where people, jobs, and services are. We have this wonderful community center we're in, a public library, a nearby No Frills grocery store, several schools, etc., all in this very close by to this site. So I think this is a perfect site for future housing growth, and I'm excited to see how the area will grow and how the new residents will improve the area. I didn't actually have any questions, just wanted to express my support. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your comment.
Hello, my name is Helen. I've lived in this area since the 1970s. So basically, I grew up here, and basically this area was low-income housing, which was specifically given for low-income new immigrants. That's what I am. That's what a lot of people in this neighborhood is. Bringing in 10,000 people, are you nuts? Seriously. Would you take 10,000 people in your neighborhood? You're nuts. Not only are you talking transportation, where are the schools? How the hell are you going to accommodate 10,000 kids? Where are you going to put the hospital for all these 10,000 people? You want this traffic coming into your neighborhood? Think about it. I sure as hell don't. I have a hard enough time getting off the damn 401. Coming off of Nielsen is ridiculous. It is a 6 to 7 light change before you even get to Shepherd. Shepherd, which is not even 500 meters. I don't care your study is off. How the heck are you going to supply that hospital right at Nielsen? No, is it Nielsen? Yeah, it's Nielsen and Ellesmere. That tiny community hospital cannot take another 10,000 people. It just cannot. My parents were there. I've had to deal with that hospital. How the heck are you going to support that? Where are you building these schools? How many more schools are you building? Seriously. 10,000 people? You don't think some of them are going to have kids? What are you going to do over the next 30 years? Seriously.
Sorry. If you don't mind if I just say, sorry, just to be clear, the City of Toronto is not proposing this. We're evaluating it.
Yet. You are approving 10,000 people to come into this neighborhood. That's what you are approving. Get off of it. You have a responsibility to us, not to them. You need to get off and think about us. We live here.
Just to be clear, nothing has been approved. Nothing has been approved. This is just a plan, and you're just getting the community feedback at this point.
If you cannot understand our feedback, you really need to get some hearing aids. And you need to understand something. We don't mind new housing, but 10,000, somebody needs to get. Okay, if you guys got the drugs, start sharing it. Because let me tell you, I ain't on anything right now, and I sure hell need one.
So just to be clear, the city staff are just reviewing the proposal. It's not their idea.
I understand it's not your idea, but you need to understand this feedback here, it's not us wanting another 10,000 people here.
Right.
Okay? And if you look at the history, look at where the subways are. Yes, you put in the high rises because you want people to be able to walk to the subway. What you guys aren't listening to is the community. The community has said, I have elderly people who walk and go to the mall. Having an outdoor sidewalk, a park outdoor, that cuts them off for half the year. Think about it. They aren't walking in the middle of winter outside. They can't. There needs to be some place that they can go. If you aren't listening, please get the wax out of your ears.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for sharing, and we appreciate your comments. And as Councillor Myers had said, this is if somebody decides they want to build a roller coaster on their property, we are obliged to evaluate it. And as part of the evaluation process, we come out to the community. So that's the first step in engagement and in evaluating an application. So just to be clear, the City of Toronto is not proposing this. We're coming out to the community to hear from you. We're a neutral party in this situation at this meeting. Thank you. Sure, but keep it very short, just because
Okay.
we have a couple of
No,
people on the.
I think it's really important to respond to this because there's growth going across the city. And what the city actually released this year was its own housing action plan. I have it on my phone. It says the city aims to build at least 285,000 new homes in the city within the next 10 years. So this is part of the city's objective, and this is furthering that objective. This is 5,700 of the 285,000. So there will be a lot more development like this across the city, and every part of the city, including where I live, will have to take its share of it. And so that's the reality that we're facing with 500,000 people coming to Canada every year.
Hi, everyone. My name is Munira. My comment is specifically about the lack of community engagement that's taken place throughout this process. I found that a lot of the frustration that people have faced, and a lot of it you see here today, is because of the lack of information that's been shared and the lack of opportunities that you guys have given to the community to actually share input into your project. There's so many things that have been said today that you could have incorporated early on into your proposal, but you didn't, because throughout the entire development process, the dialogues that you've been having have been very internal, and it's almost like you've gatekept the entire proposal from people being able to access it. And this is not in terms of having it available online. You see the variety and the diversity that exists in this community. You cannot just be doing things to check mark off a box and be like, well, it's out there, you can access it. You need to go to where people are. And this is what's the most frustrating part right now, is that there's so many things that we could be excited for when it comes to this development. The addition of new homes, the opportunity for more affordable housing, the opportunity for rental, the opportunity to actually bring more rationale and justification towards creating transit and having the new subway extension made to reach all the way to Malvern Mall. That all exists and is enabled through this development. But there's no reason for anybody to be excited about it when you just come up to us at the very end when decisions have already been made. And I understand that we have not reached final approval, but you're already halfway into the development process, and you're only coming up to us just now when your entire plan has already essentially been made, and then now asking us to give you feedback. That's not fair. We haven't been included throughout this process. What you're doing is really just hitting a bare minimum of the city's requirement. One thing I also want to mention is for Councillor Jamal Myers and Councillor Jennifer McKelvey, that responsibility is on you. You're our representatives, and you haven't asked these developers to actually provide more than the bare minimum that's required of them. That's why they're only coming up to us now to ask us questions about, well, we have a park ready for you guys. If you had talked to the community earlier, and not just seniors, but there's so much youth. There's a school right across the street from this development that you haven't even made an attempt to connect with. And having people in a store, in the mall that you're going to demolish is not good enough. And what you're doing is just giving output. You're not collecting any input. You keep coming up to us and hosting information sessions to be like, this is what's happening, this is what's going on, but you're not asking people, you're not being transparent, you're not asking people you're showing a lack of interest in community engagement. You're showing a lack of interest in the people that already live here. It's so hard to open our minds up to including 10,000 new people if you're showing that you're so ready to just forget everybody that already lives here. This is a community of over 40,000 people. A local advisory group made up of 10 to 20 people is not enough for that representation, and you councillors should also not be content with that. You need to actually hold these developers seriously accountable to creating a public consultation strategy and working to deliver on that multiple times along the way. Public consultation strategies are not new. They're very frequently used in developments all across the city. And what we're seeing in Malvern is that we are left out yet again. Left out every single time, where the standards are just not high enough to actually ask these developers to do more for us. Again, the last thing I want to say is that there is potential to be excited about this development, but you need to do your work. Developers need to be on the ground. You need to have your staff on the ground, meeting with people where they're at. Go to the community programs and talk to people. Host get-togethers. Go to meet the senior walkers in the morning and talk to them what's happening. Hear their input, hear their feedback. That's how you're going to get people excited. But right now, none of that's being done. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you really much. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's actually a really good comment to finish on, at least temporarily, to maybe answer some of the questions in the chat. And thank you so much for your comment. So I'll just quickly maybe read a few questions that we had in the chat. Thank you for everybody's patience who's been participating virtually. And I'll just read some of the questions that have come into the chat. So this would be for you, Andrew. Why is the west side of the mall have to be demolished in phase 4 when buildings only come up in phase 7 on the demolished site?
Okay. So essentially, the way that the phasing works, if I understand the question, is the first phase is built with the mall being there because there's enough room to accommodate it on the parking lot. Once the second phase starts, that's where, because it's just north of that, the mall gets affected because the mall is in that location. And so when we were working through this, and I'll look to my colleague here, Johnny, to fill in as the architect, but when you demolish that part of the mall, it didn't make sense to just, put a wall in between the rest of it. The idea was to demolish the whole chunk of it up to the food court so that the food court and the supermarket area and the shops that are in that area remain, but that whole eastern part gets demolished at the same time, because otherwise you'd be demolishing half of it and it would be kind of an awkward place to put walls, if I understand the reasoning behind it. I hope that helps to answer the question. I see. So if I understand it correctly, you're saying at phase 4, where the full mall is demolished, whether or not the supermarket is replaced at that time? Oh, I see. Oh, it's because of the road location. Johnny?
Sorry. We have to realize that there's also a parking ratio that goes with the mall. So at that stage, the surface parking will not suffice. The parking has to be replaced by an underground structure, and possibly in a new block in phase 4.
The chat. So they can't respond, unfortunately. I'll just jump to another question. Will there be a dog park? So I'll just quickly ask maybe someone from Parks to respond at the microphone there.
Can you hear me? Working? Yeah, so generally speaking, and it might cover some other questions that came up earlier, the idea is that when we get this park, it's going to be a blank canvas. We're going to then reach out to the community and determine kind of what we need, what you guys want to see in the park. So specifically to a dog park, it would be on the table. We would just have to consult and make sure it's appropriate for what you guys want, essentially.
Thank you, Joseph. The next question was, where is the EELRT station? Staff said they are planning a transit-oriented community and not a transit-adjacent community, but I don't see the station location mentioned in the presentation. As I had mentioned, the 10% design at this point is supposed to terminate on Nielsen Road around here, and then the train would basically go back the other direction. So that's where the anticipated alignment and the terminus of the station for the Eglinton East LRT is anticipated to be. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah. Sorry about that. A number of questions about Taibu, which we've covered, I think, quite a bit this evening. What energy sources are currently planned to be used for the proposed buildings on site? Is that plan in line with Transform TO? So I can partially answer that. So as part of evaluating development applications, we have what's called the Toronto Green Standard. Applicants are required to comply with the first step of it, and then we encourage them to go above and beyond, which are Tier 2, Tier 3, and Tier 4. Andrew, would you like to do comment on the energy strategy for the master plan?
I think you answered it well, Samuel. That's a detail that we'll cover through the site plan process. And there are certain basic requirements that absolutely have to be met. And sometimes our clients choose to do even more than that, things like geothermal. Sometimes it just makes sense. So that's something that we haven't got to that level of detail yet.
So there's quite a long question here, but I'll do my best to summarize. How will you ensure that this project benefits residents, many of whom have been in here for generations? Similar revitalization projects like we've seen in other parts of Scarborough actually have the effect of pushing out local residents. So what is the plan to ensure that this benefits local residents?
The benefit to local residents, and this is something that we get asked all the time on new development, because usually the new type of development that comes in is quite different than what has been there historically, especially in the former municipalities like Scarborough, North York, and Etobicoke. So it will create a more walkable environment. It's something that is deemed to be quite an attractive feature in many parts of the city and many other world cities too, where you can walk to services, where you feel comfortable walking, biking. You don't feel like you're going to get run over, walking along parking lots, things like that. So creating a walkable community is one thing. Very important is the park. I think I've stressed that a number of times today, that the park is something that is an important organizing feature that doesn't currently exist on the site. We see that as being a really strong element of it. And then some of the public spaces beyond the park as well, that Johnny showed on the small screen, unfortunately, would also augment that. And he also described what he referred to them as woonerfs. It's a Dutch concept, but basically it's enhanced walkways where cars can't usually go. And it provides almost like beautified laneways that would almost be like walking through an older city. And that would allow for more pleasant environments to walk through and stroll through. And last but not least, all the new residents are themselves a benefit. Some may not see it that way, but the benefit is having new neighbors is a good thing. It creates a more vibrant community, and the province strives to create what it calls a complete community. And the city is also trying to do that. So all of those things, in addition to the new housing that will come, we believe are strong aspects of the proposal.
Thank you. For those on the chat, just to be clear, I'm doing my best to monitor the room, and as well as there's quite a few comments and questions coming in the chat. It's kind of difficult to do it in real time. There was a question about hospitals, about access to hospitals. I'm not ignoring you intentionally. I'm just, the chats, people are typing at the same time and I'm missing the questions. But the short answer with hospitals are provincially controlled and regulated and funded. The City of Toronto has no input on hospitals. We don't even take it into account in the development review process. It's similar to school boards. We don't have the ability to ask a school board to increase the number of spaces in a school. It's tied to everything that the province does with their planning. Just for those watching, or sorry, online, somebody in the room has their hand raised. Please go ahead. It was just, will hospitals be considered as part of this? Somebody in the room asked me, I'm just so people can hear what was said online. Someone said the city does have control over population density. So just to be clear, we have one submission right now, and as part of the application, that's why we've come out to the community. They're proposing 10,000 residents. We might end up with 2,000 residents. We might end up at 0 residents if we refuse the application. So just to be clear, this is a very iterative process, and that's why we are here tonight. So that's essentially the short answer. Unfortunately, hospital planning is a provincial requirement. It makes sense to align it, but it's not aligned. We rely on a certain policy structure for reviewing applications, and unfortunately, hospitals are not part of it. I agree. So sorry, I'll just quickly say, we have comment forms actually at the table there. So if you do wish to provide additional commentary, please fill out a comment form. There's a box you can put it in. I'll read it after the consultation, and then you can also email me as well. My contact information is on the board back there, as well as I'll post it on the screen at the end of the evening. Somebody asked, will there be additional consultation, or is this it? There will be additional consultation, as well as the establishment of a local advisory group. I think we've kind of covered everything in terms of a lot of the questions have been similar to what we've discussed this evening. One question was, is there any proposed plan for a senior apartment building?
There very well could be one in the future phases, but currently for phase one, which is the two towers, no component of that is designed solely for seniors. But that could be a future phase. The way that the development works is that it's piece by piece. So each block is almost like its own design process. So once phase one is done, phase two would start getting planned, and then the program for that gets planned. Is it rental? Is it condo? Is it a mix of both? Is it senior? But the master plan doesn't, it's too far out to know what 5 to 7 years from now will be in terms of the need or the environment for that.
So I'll read out one more question from the chat. For the people virtually, there's about 5 people lined up that want to ask a question or provide a comment. So one more question from the chat. If I could really just sum up my question, how is this project not just another example of gentrification? I'll look to the applicant to respond to that.
That's a tough one. These are really fun questions to actually debate. They're difficult questions to talk about because, for instance, what is gentrification? That's a philosophical question. But to try to answer the question directly, all neighborhoods go through life cycles. No investment is not a good thing. Investment is a good thing, but I agree there has to be some control to how that affects people that live in the community today. The city has its own ways of doing that. Samuel can speak to it. And there are ways to not overwhelm communities. And one of the ways to do it is phasing. So not bringing everything in with 15 cranes all at one time, but slowly doing it so that over 20, 25 years, which is a long time, you get a community over that period that doesn't displace the people that are there today. So those are some of the methods to mitigate gentrification.
Okay, so we're at 8:15. We're willing to go much longer. I see we have 3 or 4 people lined up, so we'll try to jump through the questions and comments from people lined up, and then kind of, I guess, endeavor to finish around 8:30-ish or a bit after. So yes, sorry, please go ahead.
It's Jennifer Tate. I have done a lot of work in the Malvern community over the last 11 years. One of the problems that I'm seeing here tonight that's really disturbing me, besides the bad soil, I'm really sorry about your husband. It's been a problem, we all know that, is nobody's talking about the youths. We have over 1,800 youths every single solitary night in the Malvern community, which is a very big community, that are sleeping in garages. They're sleeping in unsafe conditions. I haven't heard not once, besides building up all these buildings, people are having a hard enough time alone just trying to pay rent besides paying a mortgage. And when you start to, because 10 years ago, you couldn't develop anything in the Malvern community because it was classified as a priority community, because one of the biggest issues that we have is the gun violence. And then you're going to bring all these people in. We got youths on the streets every single night, living in garages, in subsidized places, living in staircases. But here it is, the city comes in into such a beautiful community. We have seniors that have nowhere now to walk. We have youths that are living on the streets, but all these big fancy buildings are getting put up. Who's going to afford them? The youths? Like, do we have to turn our youths in Malvern drug dealers? Is that what we have to do in order for them to live? Because I haven't heard one thing tonight. Like, how are we going to be helping some of these youths? How are we going to help the seniors? We don't have a senior building here, but we're going to build up 10, not even one, not even two, but 10 buildings to accommodate who? The rich and the famous? Because obviously 90% of the people in here are not rich. I'm not rich. I can't afford one of those condos. But what I don't understand is that why are we not helping the ones who need the help? It's like crabs in a bucket. No disrespect to none of you, but it seems like everybody's getting a payout, but the ones that aren't getting the reaps are the ones living in the community. And this is what I don't understand. Why are we not helping where it needs to be helped instead of funding all these big people coming in? And then what's going to happen 10 years from now when they can't afford a place or we all pass away? What's going to happen to our generation? I don't think the city's looking at that. I think they're more looking at how much can we put in our pockets and don't give a damn about the residents. My opinion.
Thank you for your comment.
Just a question about, there was a mention of heating options and possible geothermal. Has, given a site this large, it seems like there's potential for district heating rather than having it necessarily on a building by building basis. Has that been investigated, and kind of what would be the options there, and what's the rationale for the current choice? Thank you.
That's another really good question. So district heating is something that probably is a niche concept that not a lot of people know about, but it's essentially a mini power plant. And we actually work on projects like this in the city of Markham, which has a district heating strategy. That's not something we've talked about on this project yet. I'm not aware of actually the city having a program like that, but that's a very interesting idea.
Hi.
Hi there. Oh, can you hear me? Yeah. I can pull that down a little bit. So my name is Debbie, and I've been a resident in Malvern for, oh my gosh, probably almost 30 years now. I came here as a young mom with my son, and he was probably about a year when we came to Malvern. Back then, Malvern was known as home of cheap rent, and it attracted a lot of people who were financially challenged, whether they were young families and parents, immigrants, newcomers. Malvern has always been known for home of cheap rent. My son is now 29 years old, and raised him in Malvern. My son would love to make a home in Malvern. He's 29 years old, and he rents a room in Malvern for $1,200. He wants a home. He doesn't want to rent a room. He wants to make a life here in Malvern. I'm so glad that somebody brought up the youth, because that's also something that I'd like to touch on. We've had challenges. This community is, this part of Malvern is technology deprived. There are many households that do not have devices and do not have internet. We already had Le Spot, a very vital, important space for technology for youth, ripped from our community, ripped from our youth. Supposedly these places are being renovated, this, that. At the end of the day, I met with the library back in January. It is now November, and the community has no clue what's happening with Le Spot. And here we are again in the same place again, another agency entity being non-transparent, and really letting the community in on what is going on. Let us know. We want to know what's going on. A space, Malvern Magic, had opened up in the mall. And I have to say, I was so disappointed at the disconnect between the consultant working in the Malvern Magic and the community. And I had to address it with him. For one, I'm not sure he was a qualified consultant. Second of all, the languages being offered aren't even, those languages, we don't have that community here in Malvern. No one speaks those languages. I had to explain to him that this is, an emerging community. I mean, the things that I had to explain to the consultant in the Malvern Magic was a real reflection of how disconnected the developer had no interest in consulting with the community. And that was really disappointing because that consultant in that space could have been a productive, positive, viable space where residents could have voiced how they feel. I remember a building engineer. He was a building engineer in Guyana, and he came in there and he had some absolutely wonderful things to say to the consultant. The consultant couldn't understand a word the gentleman was saying. So, for me, the Malvern Magic was a clear reflection of how much interest this developer has in our community, and in how we feel about this development. And, I don't want to reiterate, I do have a platform, I did an interview on CBC today. I've done Scarborough Mirror. So I've been speaking on media about the redevelopment. Again, just reiterating how disappointed I am in the developer and the disconnection between the developer and the community, the lack of transparency, and again, our youth. What about our youth? We don't have enough schools in Malvern for the high school students already in our community. We have so many students that are traveling outside of Malvern to go to school. We have 2 schools. We have one school, Mother Teresa, I believe its capacity is under 500. Well, if you look at Malvern and how many youth we have in Malvern, it's no wonder that we have almost, not long ago it was almost 50%, and with the work I've been doing, I can assure you that number has not changed much, but we have a high number of Black males that do not graduate from high school in this community. So we need to remember our youth. There are many youth who want to make a home in this community, live here, want something affordable. So let's please remember our young people, like my son who grew up in Malvern his whole life, 29 years old, and he's renting a room for $1,200 at Morningside and Sewell's. Why can't he make a home here in Malvern? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Debbie. I'll just, because it came up a couple times, just at least from the city side, when this application was submitted in June, it was the election blackout period. So when there's an election happening, we actually are not allowed to go out to the community to do this type of engagement. Then there was the by-election. So we almost lost like 8 or 9 months where we weren't permitted to really go out and do this type of engagement activity. We didn't want to do it in August when everybody's gone on summer holidays, and we need at least a few weeks or even probably 2 months to prepare. So we really couldn't begin in earnest until July to start planning this event. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. Obviously, this is very important and an important part of the process. And I'll just quickly touch on the youth comment because it's come up a couple times. So it's not part of our typical process, but we have engaged with our colleagues in social development at the City of Toronto to try to bring some of those social issues that are not normally taken into development application review to be considered as, a social planning framework lens to have that applied to this application. So that's just something that has been initiated recently. So that was one question, or sorry, one thing I just wanted to highlight. And there's one person at the microphone and there's another hand raised.
Just a question on, I guess the inability to reach out to the community due to by-elections, elections, blackout periods, etc. Has progress been made towards this proposal during that, I guess, blackout period time? Because if so, then I feel like it was kind of a disservice to the community not being able to engage with this proposal, because I'm sure that some of our inputs and comments, questions could have been addressed during that time, been included within the proposal to make us more excited, kind of ease our concerns, etc. But, where are we at with the proposal? Would it have been the same if we had, had this kind of engagement earlier? Have things progressed further along with the proposal? Like, what does that look like?
So the proposal we're discussing tonight is the one from June 2022. They've only provided one formal submission. One submission on the record, it's the one that was back in 2022, June 2022, 5,700 units, 15 towers, 5 new streets, 4-acre public park. So that's what we're discussing tonight, the one from 15 months ago.
If nothing's, it's all proposed, you said nothing's in stone yet.
Of course.
So tonight, with everybody speaking their views, are we saying there's a possibility it could not happen if it's not,
So
if nothing's happened yet?
So
If
that
you're
that's actually probably a good moment to segue into next steps. So I'll explain that later on, but maybe I can just answer it right now. No.
And I'm hearing tonight it isn't.
Of course not. So maybe I didn't explain it properly and I'm
No, you
terribly
were
sorry,
fine.
but
I got confused from that.
no. So in Ontario, when a landowner proposes to do something on their property, let's say they wanted to build a roller coaster, the City of Toronto is obliged to review that application, no matter how extreme it might seem. As part of that process, we go out to the community to hear from the community. If it's a roller coaster, if it's a NASA like rocket launching pad, we have to actually take the application in, circulate it to everybody for review, like the engineering department, transportation, urban design, parks. We do circulate to the school board as well. I know that was highlighted a few times. We take all the comments, we give it back to the applicant and say, respond to these comments. We begin our engagement with the community. We take all the feedback, we give it to the applicant. We say, this is what we heard. And I mean, they're here tonight, so they have the opportunity to hear what's being said. And we ask for another submission. So it's I can't speak on their behalf. Just for everyone online, the question was, why did the applicant not go to the community first? And then I'll ask them to respond to that.
Yeah, and thank you for that whole conversation, and I'm grateful to have a chance to respond because I want to be completely honest with everybody here and online. Something will happen on the site. Nothing happening is not realistic. The city's own plan contemplates mixed uses on the site. So some level of development will occur. Our client has spent likely quite a lot of money on architects, myself, and a whole team. Something will happen. The question is, what is it? Will it be what's on the screen that you saw? Actually, it won't be because, as Johnny showed in the last slide, we've already had discussions with the city about significant changes, reducing towers, lowering heights, changing the location of things, expanding the park. The conversation is now. So the fact that we've submitted the application, that doesn't mean the conversation stops at all. In fact, we wish we had this meeting much earlier, and we heard why there was a problem in doing that with the blackout period and whatnot. That's an anomaly. Normally, we meet with the community within a few months of the submission, and that unfortunately didn't happen. We did have the Magical Malvern open house, which was above and beyond what our client was required to do. They wanted to engage with the community. I was disappointed to hear that some didn't, really perhaps like it, or there were some faults in it. We'll take all that back and we'll listen to that and hopefully improve and do better next time. But we do want to be clear, something will happen here, and that's why we're here. We want to hear the input because now is the time to hear about all this. And the conduit is the city. So call Samuel, let him know the comments, let others know, and then they'll filter it back to us. And of course, there has to be a push and shove to see what's reasonable at the end. There has to be agreement. but we do this all the time, Johnny and I. There will be some agreement at the end, and it will be the best that it can be.
So I'm back again, Stacey Berry. One thing I forgot to raise, how many of you here have heard of Caravana and have enjoyed Kitty Carnival and the Tamil Heritage Festival? So historically, as you know, my background's Caribbean. That is like a deep fabric of the community. The Kitty Carnival is like a mini version of Caravana. It's friendly, it's free, and happens at Nielsen Park. I went this summer. The only place we park is at lovely Malvern Mall. And so we're now getting into a situation where they moved from Eglinton West because of developers taking up all that open space and the ability for people to celebrate and express their culture. So I'm hoping the applicants will consider the importance of having a cultural, equitable, and almost a heritage lens with the history of what this means for a huge demographic of the community. People come from all over the GTA to celebrate this thing. And I would like to encourage you perhaps in the summer, maybe check it out, because sometimes when you see the faces of the people, because communities are not just living in your cubicle or your homes, it's about the relationships, it's about the memories, and also celebrating our cultural heritage. So I really hope that's something that you will consider.
Hi.
Hey, so we heard a lot from people that have lived here for a long time, so I thought I'd give my opinion because I just moved here a couple years ago. And so I'm an engineer. I work in Markham, and it just seems like the target community that you're trying to get for this new development is kind of people like me who are coming for work and need a place to live, or recent immigrants and stuff like that. And I think a big reason that I moved to Malvern particularly was, one, it's kind of central enough to my job, but also the feeling of community here is so much more deep and so much more important than anything that you'd feel in like downtown Toronto. Like you can go to downtown Toronto and you can meet up with your friends and you can go to a club and you can go like walk down the street and see a couple shops, but you don't see the amount of community engagement. You don't see like people that know each other walking around, that like people can live in a building and not know their neighbors. That's what downtown Toronto is like. Malvern is not like that. You know your neighbor, you know the people that live in the building next to you, you know like the security guard that lives downstairs. It's important to, development's important, progress is important, and people that are young and people that are moving to the city want that. But we want that in marriage with the community that exists here. And the other thing, like that was mentioned before, there's so much culture in Malvern. There's so many immigrants in Malvern. There's a lot of like families, and a lot of another thing about like downtown Toronto is like you build these huge high rises with these tiny little apartments. I don't know too much, but from what I see here, and I actually moved from living with my family, a lot of people live with their families, and we need space, and we need indoor space as well. And so I lived with my parents and my grandparents, and every winter I would take them to the mall every day just to go for a walk. And they'd go to the mall and they'd see people that they knew, and it just make their day a little bit better. So those type of things are important for any community. Things being beautiful is not enough, and things need to really involve everybody that lives here already.
Thank you for sharing that. I'll just quickly say there is a requirement. It's called the Growing Up Guidelines for larger units in developments. So we require a minimum, is it 25 or 35% of 2 and 3 bedroom units? 25% minimum 2 and 3 bedroom units, larger units in buildings.
With what square footage?
I believe the range is supposed to be between 89 square meters and 101 square meters. I can't do the math to square feet, but I believe it's 89 to 101 square meters. I'm looking to my over 1,000 square feet per 3-bedroom apartment. What that costs, I don't know, but those are our guidelines required 2 and 3 bedroom units. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, my name is Jeff Brown, as I introduced myself earlier. I am an artist.
lived here my whole life since I was 6 years old. Malvern Mall was awesome when they came, I think 1985, and everybody uses it. Can you just build your condo towers over top of it and leave that space? So we still have our space and you have your space? Thank you.
Yeah, I can respond to that. So some developments in Toronto are around malls, such as Fairview Mall, are occurring around the mall because the mall itself is healthy. Yorkdale is going through that. Square One is going through that, and other malls too. Baby Village Mall is going through that, where they're keeping the mall. This mall was deemed by our client to not be anymore, unfortunately, a viable mall to retain, but to instead replace it with this form of community. Malls are becoming more expensive to maintain due to heating costs and things like that. From my understanding, they need to be really high performing, like the bigger malls, for them to be viable. And you can see that there's been like a luxuryification, if that's a word, of malls, where Yorkdale used to be a more middle-class mall, and now it's more really expensive type of mall. And we're seeing that the older malls that are underperforming are generally being replaced with mixed-use development. So those are the two types of mall development that we're seeing in our industry. And the reality is Malvern Mall has fallen into the second category of being not going up market, but instead being replaced with housing and still retail. All the retail, it's very important to know, is being retained within the base of the buildings, including the supermarket.
Just one final comment and question from a person that's waiting to speak, and then we're going to wrap up. We're well past time now. If you want to speak to me afterward, if you have more questions, please come on over. But yes, please go ahead.
Hi, I know it's the latest thing to do all walking paths and everything like that, but I worked in hospitals for 42 years, and all of the hips and knees that were broken because of people slipping on the ice. And I would kind of prefer a indoor mall that you could drive to so that you're minimizing the danger to seniors. And seniors are increasing in this country, so I think that should be taken into consideration. And believe me, I don't think Malvern is anything like an upscale mall. It's like where you go when you need something fast. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that comment. Okay, thank you everybody for all of the questions and discussion. This is just the beginning of the City of Toronto's consultation and engagement on this proposal. So there will be many more. We do have what's called a local advisory group, which we're in the process of establishing. So, you know, your input, we've heard so many great things tonight, so many important anecdotes about your lived experience in the Malvern community. And that's something that we really need represented in this advisory group. There are more applications, as I understand, on the table at the front near the door. You can also just email me. We made a separate email account for this project. It's just Malvern Town Centre at toronto.ca, and I can provide you a digital copy of the local advisory group application form. It's open to anybody. Right now, we're hoping for 15 to 20 people, but if we get more, then we can open it up to more people. So didn't anticipate that we would get 25 people taking applications this evening. So in terms of next steps, we kind of did highlight where we're at in the process. We have an application that came in June 2022. There's a bunch of documents that we have to review as part of it. We're providing technical feedback to the applicant based on their documentation. We've kind of touched a little bit on that tonight. They're going to take the input from the community and the local advisory group and the other engagements that we're going to have on this, with the intention that they will incorporate that into their proposal and then provide the city with an updated submission for review. And that process can go on for quite a long time. I have rezoning applications that span, I have one that is back from 2014 that's still in process. It's maybe not a good thing to say, but so this is just the beginning of the process. And just to be clear, like really we're at step 1.5 right now. We got the application, we gave one set of comments, and we've now come out to the community to talk about what we are concerned about, as well as some of the priorities we would like to see considered as part of this application. Eventually, at the end of this whole process, city planning writes a report to community council with a recommendation based on all of the things that we've talked about tonight, and including, the provincial policies, the planning policies, everything sort of that we have had in the discussion for the last 2.5 hours. And then essentially city council, or community council rather, in Scarborough renders a decision on the application to approve or refuse. So what happens next, depending on how council decides to vote on it, could mean that it could then go to the Ontario Land Tribunal, which you've probably heard at some point in time. It's referred to as the OMB historically. Sometimes people refer to it as the LPAT, but it's a judicial body that would essentially make a decision on the application. That's the way land use planning works in Ontario. So that essentially kind of summarizes what the next steps are. In the short term, we're going to provide the feedback to the applicant. Hope to have more engagement from people through email, phone calls, local advisory group, hopefully more consultations of this size and scale. And then hopefully they will provide us with an updated submission reflecting the conversations that we've had. So I think that kind of I've been up here for way too long, so we'll give some people other opportunities to speak. So this application is in Councillor Meyer's ward, so I'm going to give him the opportunity to close out the evening. Thank you. And thank you for attending, and thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much, Samuel. Great job. Thank you everyone for coming up, and those who stayed with us online. Thank you to the applicants for coming to this evening, and thank you to Deputy Mayor McKelvey for joining us as well. We heard a lot of good feedback. We are listening. I am listening. Deputy Mayor McKelvey is listening. We are listening to your feedback. We do take this seriously. As you know, as Samuel explained, there was a blackout period where we couldn't do much, but we do appreciate the feedback. We do take it seriously. We do want something good to happen, something that benefits not only the people that are planning to move here, but something that benefits the people that live here today. We heard transit, we heard affordable housing, we heard seniors, we heard youth. We also heard just, leaving a retail space, something so that there's a mall so you can go and grab things when you need them, as that was the best way to put it. So we are just at the beginning phase. We do want something good to happen, and please, please, please get involved, stay involved. There's going to be a local advisory group. That's your opportunity to be heard. It's not your only opportunity to be heard. One thing we did hear loud and clear is that the community doesn't feel like they've been properly engaged, properly consulted with, and there's no way to have their feedback incorporated. So that's something that I'll take back and work with city planning and work with the applicant to see what we can do to make sure there's a better mechanism to sort of incorporate that feedback on an ongoing basis. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.